been so inspiring to me. I'm just so jazzed to come here every year. Always going home, just energized and so excited about chiropractic. And I just want to get my hands on people already.
They did good last year, but they surpassed themselves this year. You have got to come.
I love the wave. It's been a great seminar, meeting up with old friends and catching up and learning a lot and being re-inspired.
I want to welcome everybody to our first webinar series out of 4 for our birthday at Life West. As you know, we are 40 years old since 1981 to 2021. Our actual birthday is this Saturday on the, I believe it's the, coming up on the 12th. And I'm probably off on that date, but no, the 13th. And yet all week we are celebrating our wonderful birthday at Life West. And I want to thank all of you that are joining us today, along with our wonderful panelists. I have 2 phenomenal chiropractors who have been in this game of chiropractic for more years combined than most of us combined. They've done amazing things in chiropractic, but mostly I like to think of what they've done for Life West because they've contributed greatly. With me today is Dr. Humber. Dr. Humber graduated in 1956. He practiced when he graduated for 2 months, then got drafted or called to war, and then he came back 2 years later, practiced in Georgia, in Madison, Georgia, and from there he moved on after a couple of years to work with Dr. Sid Williams in his offices in the Atlanta area. And then in 1978, he came to Life College and started working at Life College for 24 years and with Dr. Sid until he retired. And he had the fine opportunity of meeting one of the greatest statesmen in chiropractic, Dr. Gerry Clum. And Dr. Gerry Clum is with us tonight. Everybody knows him as the first president of Life West. He just did amazing things at Life West. Dr. Clum graduated in 1973 from Palmer College. He practiced in Davenport while he was on the faculty, and he ended up going down to Georgia in January of 1975 and started working at Life College, Life Chiropractic College at the time, now known as Life University. And then from there, it was history, which we'll hear about tonight, when he came to Life West and the West Coast in 1981. So, gentlemen, I want to thank you for being with us tonight. I know that Dr. Didi, you are on East Coast time, so it's whatever time it is there right now. But thank you, and Gerry, it's always great to see you and have you guys, both of you, start off this wonderful webinar series that we're doing this week. So let's jump into it. For our viewers, we are going to be talking. I'll be asking Dr. Clum and Dr. Humber some questions for the next probably about 20 minutes or so, 25. Then we're going to open it up to questions from you. Okay, I'll repeat this later, but there's 3 ways that you can ask questions. One is you can type a question in the chat box, and when that question goes in the chat box, Shane Pilgrim, who is our host tonight, he will make sure that gets asked to our panelists. The second way, you can raise your hand. On your screen, you should be able to see a hand that you can raise. If you raise your hand, Shane will see that. He'll call on you and you'll get unmuted. And then you can ask your question to either one of these 2 wonderful men that are with me or both of them. And then the third way, if you can't do either of those, is just send an email to presidents with an S, president's office at lifewest.edu. And my assistant, Sharon Seto, will make sure that Shane gets those questions. And I'll go over that again with you before we open up for questions. So, gentlemen, let's jump into it. It's so great to have you with us on this inaugural Monday night, the Monday of the week. We're doing our birthday celebration. We got a lot happening on campus this week. But let's kind of jump into some stuff. I want to ask you some questions. And I think the easiest question to go into, let's talk about how this whole thing got started. Obviously, a lot took place to bring the birth of Life West. And, I like to kind of open it up to you. Gerry, if you want to start off and kind of share, your picture of how you saw this and the reality that and then Dee Dee, you'll be able to jump in from the other side and be able to share with us how this got started.
Yeah, well, thank you, Ron. First of all, great to be with you and with Dr. Humber, that's for sure. And thank you very much for all the effort that has gone into this series. I'm looking forward to it and hearing everyone throughout the week, and then hopefully being on campus on Friday with everybody. But we think about, we got to go back in time here to the late 70s. There hadn't been a lot of growth in the educational community and the profession. Sherman had come along in the early 70s. Life had come along shortly thereafter. And there really wasn't any other activity going on of any kind. And then in Northern California, there was the establishment of Pacific States Chiropractic College. And the Doctors Wentland and Anderson were the genesis behind Pacific States. And their goal was to have a upper cervical, specifically a NUCA-oriented curriculum in California that would obviously offer the Doctor of Chiropractic degree. And they were wonderfully well-intentioned. They were as dedicated as you could possibly imagine. But quite honestly, they didn't know the ball game they were getting into, and they were getting eaten alive. They had gone through some leadership problems. They had contacted me directly and said, would you come out for an interview? And I did, and came out for an interview and was offered the position and accepted the position. And as I thought about it, I called Dr. Anderson back almost at the last minute before I was to head to California and said, you don't need me. You need something bigger than this. You need Dr. Williams. You need the base that Dr. Williams brings to the table. You need the gravitas that he and his name and his reputation in the profession needs. And I'm flattered, but the truth of the matter is, you need something more than me. Out of that came an opportunity for Dr. Williams, and I believe you, Dr. Humber, didn't you were in that meeting with George?
Yes.
And for they to go out to come out to California and to sit down with George Anderson and George Wentland, and out of that came the next steps. And Dee Dee was in the middle of that, so I'll let him talk about what those meetings were like at that time.
Yes. Before I get into that, Dr. Ron, let me congratulate you as president out there at Life West right now, and the celebration that you're going to have this week for 40 years of producing wonderful doctors of chiropractic. It's just gives me goosebumps just thinking about it. And be honest with you, thinking about 30 years that Dr. Gerry was there, and of course we've been close buddies since he came as a Palmer student down to DE meetings in Atlanta. But anyway, congratulations, and thanks for having me on. It's certainly a privilege. And we had the opportunity to, Dr. Sid confided in me relatively closely. I can't tell you how many times a day, but at any rate, I got a call from him and said, Dee Dee, these doctors started a school out in the Bay Area, San Francisco area, and they're in trouble, and they want some help. And I got a call from Dr. Anderson, and he wants us to come out there and see what we can do to be of help. And so Dr. Sid, Dr. Nell, myself went out and met the Dr. George Anderson, Dr. George Wentland, and Elvira, Dr. George Anderson's wife. They met us at San Francisco airport and took us over, showed us the school. Dr. Sid talked to Dr. Anderson and Wentland about what was there, and wasn't a lot. I'll tell you at the time, it was sort of picking up the pieces. But at any rate, Dr. Sid liked them. He liked the fact that they were dedicated to upper cervical chiropractic. I can tell you that. he appreciated that. And so we had just a great meeting with him and came back. And Dr. Sid was so impressed with the opportunity that was there, the challenge that was there, because he was good at taking on challenges. But at any rate, he had a meeting with the Board of Trustees at Life Marietta, and they made a loan of $500,000 to Pacific States. Dr. Sid making a requirement that the name would be changed from Pacific States to Life Chiropractic College West. And also, the other stipulation was that he'd be able to choose the president. And so thank goodness he made the right choice,
Yes.
as we all know. And as I mentioned earlier, Dr. Gerry was there for 30 years, and no one could have done a better job than Gerry did. But those early days were challenging. As I mentioned, it was like picking up the pieces. I think there was 140 students. You're sucking wind, pardon the expression, but when you run an educational institution with 140 students, it's tough. But Gerry took on the challenge and just did a marvelous job through the years. And is our privilege also to serve on the Board of Regents at Life West for, I guess, maybe a decade or so.
Yeah.
But at any rate, it's great to know the history. To think that it's been 40 years. Shucks, I was a young man back then, relatively speaking.
Well, it's interesting because when you look and see where the vision was, right? When Dr. Williams flew out with yourself and met, and Dr. Clum, you came back, told Dr. Williams about this, obviously, right? And then set that up, and then Dee Dee, yourself, and Dr. Williams and Dr. Nell Williams, the Williamses, flew out, met Dr. Wentland, met Dr. Anderson. They were so committed. I mean, because what, back in the 70s, trying to start a school and make this happen, and there were NUCA practitioners, they wanted to see this going, and then when it was taken over, I mean, the beautiful thing was they had the foresight to know to pass it on, and we have to give them credit for that, right? Because sometimes you'll hold on to the ship too long, right? And the next thing you know, you're dancing on the bottom of the ocean, to nothing. And then when they turned it over, when you really think about it, and this is something I want everyone to think about, here they send Dr. Clum, Dr. Gerry out there, not a West Coast man, right? I don't know who you knew on the West Coast. There were some people from DE on the West Coast, and then they send you out there to take over the school, right? And save the school. Wow. I mean, to me, that's like, what a daunting task, right? But you were up for it. So I knew it took, a lot of sweat. It took a lot of prayer and a lot of faith, right? To make that happen, and when that did happen, what was it like? Here you are, you're coming out. What'd you walk into?
Well, it was, I got out here in January of 81. And I remember Sid and I had talked about me coming out, and we agreed to it and talked Kathy into it. And I remember there used to be a bus service from the North Side Airport Express from Marietta out to the Atlanta airport. And Sid met me at the North Side Airport Express the day I was leaving, and I was scared to death. And it was just he and I standing in the parking lot by the bus, waiting for the airport bus. And I told him I was scared. He said, "Oh, you do fine." He said, "You got to remember, it's just a game. So you got to treat the two imposters the same, victory or defeat. Doesn't make any difference." And he was giving me a typical Dr. Williams talk. And remember, he reached down, took his LP pin off his jacket, and he put it on mine. He says, "Go have fun." And I can remember that like it were yesterday. And got on the bus, headed to San Francisco, or headed to the airport to San Francisco. And when I got there, George and Elvira were very gracious. They were very helpful and so on. And I took up residence in the Vagabond Inn which is now the Target store on Hesperian, uh, in Hayward, and started to work. And Kathy and the kids were still in Atlanta, and they stayed there through May, and they didn't get out till May. So I had time. The good thing in the very beginning, where I was going with all this, is that I knew nobody. Dr. Dieter, Carl Dieter, down in San Jose was really the only person in the area that I knew other than George, Dr. Anderson, and so I had nobody to hang around with, nobody to go have a beer with, or nobody to do anything with. So I worked, and that's really worked out very, very well in retrospect. That Kathy and the kids were back here, and I didn't have the day-to-day stuff and the hour-to-hour stuff that you have with the family and young kids at that point. Kathy had all of that to herself. And I think back now of what she did by herself at that time, I'm embarrassed and humbled at the same time. But in those early days, it was just all we did. We was we had 4 or 5 months there to really try and pull together what we could before Kathy and the kids got here, and then that was really the jumping off point. And that I was thoroughly immersed in it because there was nothing else for me to do. I didn't, like I said, I didn't know anybody, and so it was very good in terms of that opportunity. And when I got here, one of the very first things that I did was to meet with the faculty and meet the student body and let them know. And they had lots of questions, they had lots of concerns, and they didn't apply and to go to Life West. They applied to go to Pacific States. And so there was, for some of them, I was quite an intruder. And the idea that George Anderson and George Wetland had to let their baby go to SID and to Life was quite offensive, and they didn't want any part of it. At the same time, they didn't want to lose their future and their investment, their education, and so on. And it took a little while, but we all got on the same page, and it went on very well from there. And things started to percolate and started to grow, and I engaged with the state board as to keep one of the things that Sid had talked to me about early on was to don't make sure they're not in the dark, keep them well informed and so on. And so I met routinely with the state board, and they were very good to me, frankly. They were very good to Life West, and they gave us a lot of latitude, and I remember Willard Smith, who passed away not too long ago, was the first African American chiropractic board member in the United States. Willard was on the board at the time. He was very kind. Paul Peterson from Sacramento was on the board. Marilyn Smith from San Diego was on the board. And the executive director was Gerry Clum, who ultimately went to work for the ACA as their executive director. He was the staff member, senior staff member for the board, and they were helpful. And they, like I said, they gave us a good bit of latitude, and didn't give us any gifts, but they did give us some breathing room, which was great. And then immediately rolled into the CCE activities, and the CCE was going to be the state board was an immediate situation. They could have stopped our activities and shut us down anytime they wanted to. And so we had to deal with them. And then we moved on to the CCE activities, and that between 81 and 83 is when we had our first CCE visit, was in 83. So that was a longer process to get all of that in place.
Yeah. Well, I remember this, that, well, even just thinking about it, and Dee Dee, you can probably speak to this. When you're going to start a school, because you're at Life College, you're Life Marietta, in those early days, and Gerry, you took over a school that had 140 something students in it that really needed to grow. you know, it takes a lot to put butts in seats, you know, and you know, Dee Dee, you probably knew Dr. Williams' mindset. Obviously, he trusted Dr. Clum. He trusted Gerry explicitly, you know, knowing that he was the right person, the right man at the right time for the right job, right?
Yep.
What were, you know, like, because, you know, here you are, you, the two of you are in Georgia building this other college up, right? You know, with your team over there. What were the thoughts going on about Life West at the time?
Well, like you mentioned, Dr. Ron, and we mentioned earlier, the name of the game is students. Of course, you got to have students to keep the school alive. And of course, Gerry will attest to this fact that Dr. Sid, you know, he was, I was just, I guess maybe I should say demanding, but he had, he he wanted to make sure anything he got involved with was a success. And that school out there, and him having Gerry there, he was determined that it was going to go over. And he had the right guy in place to make sure that happened. But they were in constant contact, way more so than I was. I will say this regarding Life Marietta. Dr. Sid had Dynamic Essentials, DE meeting, which at the time was really a strong program for chiropractors, well known in the profession. Thousands of chiropractors had been in attendance. So when he kicked off Life West, Life Marietta, Life Chiropractic College in Marietta, he already had an alumni, but the alumni group was from Dynamic Essentials, and so the growth he put out. This doesn't go to Life West, but I will mention he put out a call for a library. You don't have any library, any books. He put out a call, and chiropractors started hauling books of every kind and bringing them and dumping them at the school in Marietta. I'm sure Gerry can recall that as well. But you know, you have to start from scratch, and that's the way it was at Life Marietta. And then in a sense, that's the way it was when Gerry got out to California and taking over Life Chiropractic College West. It was not a fun time for a good period of time. Marietta struggled. You know, the first class was like 22 students, and then the next class was like 14 students. And so the third quarter, it came back up, but it wasn't easy. And so anytime you start an educational institution, you're going through tough times. You have to have strong leadership. That's what we were fortunate to have both in Marietta and at Life West. And our kudos to Dr. Gerry and the years he put in there. The success of that institution was the driving force. Of course, the founder of Life Chiropractic College, Dr. Sid, his determination to make sure that school out there was a success. But he had the right guy, the right place, at the right time. Nobody could have done it any better. And kudos to you, Dr. Gerry, for 30 years of dedicated service out there. And I count you as a friend and a colleague. It's been my privilege through my time in chiropractic and for many, many years now to have you as a good friend, close friend and colleague. And so it's just been, when I'm thinking about now, Dr. Ron, this afternoon, I was thinking 40 years, man, you know, that seems like a long time, but you know, in the, you know, you go back and say when Palmer was 40 years old.
Think of an eye, right?
You know, yeah, yeah. And so it's just, you know, it won't be long. You'll be having the 50th anniversary, and then you'll have the 60th anniversary. And next thing you know, before you turn around, the people that follow us will be celebrating the 100th anniversary out at Life West. And think of all the thousands and thousands of chiropractors that are around the world because of the founding of that institution out there. So,
Yeah, I'm in awe.
and thank you for your leadership right now, Dr. Ron.
I'm in awe. Gerry, I'm in awe that, you know, we graduated our 5,000th chiropractor that walked across the stage a year and a half ago, whenever it was, maybe a little earlier, maybe a little bit after that. But to think that you were part of, the shaping of every one of those students is just crazy. I mean, it's just crazy. And I will tell you this, Dr. Clement, to all of our listeners, and Dr. Didi and I can probably attest to this. I was in school when you left. You were my advisor, Gerry, at Life, Life College. I transferred there in Marietta, and we missed your Mustang. I mean, you had that one parking spot. Remember that, Didi? That one parking spot in front of the annex building, right? And it was always there. And then in January it was gone. It was like, it was just crazy. So your presence was always felt when it was there, and then when it was gone, it was like there was just something that was missing. But we knew something big was happening on the West Coast, and then you came out and you took Dr. Wentland and Dr. Anderson's vision, and literally, and then Dr. Williams' vision on top of that, because as Dr. Humber said, Dr. Sid didn't like to lose at anything, and he always won because he always listens to his inner voice. And you grew this college. You took it up to 800 students, whatever it was. How'd you do it? Just being alone. I mean, not knowing many people.
Well, it was just like you said. There wasn't any choice. There was no plan B. Plan A was make it work and go from there. One of the things that's important for people to think about is that this was 1981. Life had just received recognized candidate for accreditation status. They were in a constant fight with CCE, and I mean nasty, nasty stuff. And it was all uphill. And Sid was counseled by CCE consultants and others. Don't do that thing in California. Don't do it. And if you go back to the early days of Pacific States and think about it, the generation of what became Northern California College of Chiropractic, when became Palmer West, and then Pacific States became Life West. There was not only was there a new, bringing out a new institution, there were two new institutions coming out within 40 miles of each other, and it was a real competitive environment locally as well as nationally. And as Dr. Humber had made reference to the importance of the DE meeting, that was just as important for Life West. Because I turned to those people. I turned to you. I turned to Mary. I turned to Carl. I turned to the Handleys up in Seattle, and Dr. Butters, Dave Butters up in Seattle, and all of the people that were there and that I had known through DE, and they came to work for Life West. And one way or another, whether it was referring students, whether it was hosting career nights, whether it was seeking donors. That cadre, that's the cadre of people that I was talking about when I talked to George Anderson. George Wentland said, "You don't need me, you need the bigger deal," and you needed Sid, and it was that group of people that really got behind and helped to energize what was going on at the college at Life West. I'll have to admit, and I don't mean to cast any shade in Sid's direction when I say this. But I bought the farm on a promise that was made, and it was, you go out there and get things going, you get things stabilized, and we'll send out people, and we'll do this, and we'll do that, and in 30 years they never materialized. and I had a couple of conversations with Sid along the way. I said, and I'll leave the adjectives out of it. But I asked him several times, "Where's the cavalry?" It was a specific kind of cavalry.
Yeah, exactly. But Gerry, he had the faith. He knew you could do it. He just had to let you know that you had support behind you, right? And that's really, and you did do it. You did it magnificently. I mean, for what you built.
You're very kind. It was a great run, and it was, great challenges along the way. When we went up for our first run of accreditation, we were deferred. and it was a real blow. And the student body hung in there. And in fact, that was the time when that happened. Was the time when many of the people in the first class transferred from Life West to Life to be able to complete their degree without a significant delay, because then, as now, a student has to complete the final year at the institution granting the degree. So some of them were in 10th or 11th quarter, and they wound up having to do an extra additional quarter or two at Life to be able to complete their degree. So there was that cross-pollination that started, and there was Claudia Onrig and the Balls and a number of other folks that went back to Atlanta and got their degree there. And, were able, but those people all came back to California as well. And they became part of the support group for Life West and continued to help us grow. We had lots of challenges, lots of help along the way. And, one of the people that I really should mention who was just tremendous in those days was Pete O'Hara. Mm-hmm. And Pete practiced down in San Jose, and he was a very dedicated and effective Gonstead practitioner, had a great practice. And, and Pete came to Life West. I'll never forget, out of the blue, I was going through some paperwork and I found a letter, or I found a check for $5,000. And I about jumped out of my seat, and I said, like $5,000 checks didn't come through. And lo and behold, it was a donation from Pete O'Hara. And he wanted us to make sure, he wanted us to buy some audio visual equipment so we'd have good video and so on. And then, to make things even better, Pete joined the faculty, was teaching technique for us, and then went out and gathered together a cadre of 8 or 10 Gonstead practitioners from Northern California, and they became the core of the technique department. And for 10 years, every one of them worked for no salary at all, donated their salary back to the institution, and they helped to create the name and the reputation for Life West as the adjusting institution. And it was their skill and their expertise that came to us. And along the way, Dan Murphy joined us in those early days, and we started to develop the curriculum around the input from Dan and Malik Schlossberg in those early days as well. So we had lots of folks that we had our core basic science people that were rock solid from the beginning. And then we had our chiropractors that joined us along the way, helped Dan, Malik, Pete and company. And it was a very exciting time as folks began to come together and the momentum began to build, and it was a great time, great run.
And Gerry, the people you're talking about, they were behind Life West, they were behind you, they were behind the vision that was there for the college, and they were behind, principled chiropractic.
That's right.
And that's the beauty, that, it takes a village, right, gentlemen? It takes a village to build any of this stuff. But when that village comes together, we can move mountains. And the people that you just talked about, by the way, we have the first class that entered Pacific States will be with us on Thursday night. And I think there's going to be about 9 members of that class. And some of them went to Life. And Dr.
Right.
Williams, allowed that to happen, and with Dr. Clum, and allowed them to go there, and they could graduate and they can do that, and they get student loans and all the other things. And then we also have Dan Murphy. Dan will be on Wednesday night. He'll be with us. So all these people are going to be coming together. Hey, I want to open it up. If you have any questions at all for these 2 phenomenal chiropractors and phenomenal people who had the vision behind Life West, please either put them in the chat box, raise your hand, And Shane will get them taken care of. You can email president's office at lifewest.edu. Shane, are there any questions that have come in?
Yeah, we have one by Dr. Carroll and Joe Ball. Hi, Dr. Clum and Dr. Humber. Thank you for your commitment to the chiropractic profession all these years. Dr. Clum, was it a difficult decision for you to come to California to take the helm of Life West?
No, it wasn't. It was a great opportunity. It's hard to relate. Dr. Humber will appreciate this. Ron will as well. The relationship that we had with Sid was really quite remarkable, and the faith and the confidence that we had in him was tremendous. Sid said we could do it, and quite honestly, that's all I needed to know. And if Sid thought we could do it, we could do it. You know, and it sounds so simplistic, and it sounds so almost childish, you know, to say today. But the bottom line was, you know, I had unquestioned faith in his capacity and in his direction and where it was going. So when the opportunity came up, you know, I was thrilled to have it, and you know, it was just a grand opportunity, and you know, we never in my life dreamed of being in California or anything of the nature, and you know, the way it worked out, quite remarkable. But I will be grateful to my last breath to Sid for the opportunity that he gave me, and not only the opportunity, but then the latitude to get the job done.
Yeah, and I think we can all admit to this. And Dee Dee, you know, out of the three of us, you had the longest history with Dr. Williams. You knew him before you guys even went to school. But he was the ultimate coach, wasn't he? He was like the Newt Rockney, the Vince Lombardi, the whatever you want to call it, who could just tell you, you can go out there and you can win this game, and you'll just go out and run through a wall. You know, I mean, he was just that type of guy because he believed so much in his players. You know, and Gerry, he believed in you. I mean, you were the savior, so to speak, of this college. You know, he had the vision, but you were the one who came out and, you know, and laid the bricks, you know, and did that work. And Dee Dee, you know, Dr. Sid, that's his attitude, right? You know.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yep.
Let me mention this, Ron, if you don't mind. You know, Dr. Sid had not a long period of time, but short enough period of time, yet he knew what Gerry was able to do at Life. Gerry had many hats at Life before he headed west, and in those early days,
everything in life.
you didn't just have one thing to do, and so Gerry had been dipped, as we call it, pretty well by Dr. Sid at Life, and Dr. Sid in observing what Gerry could do and did do at Life made it easy for him to pick Gerry to go out. And one other thing I'd like to mention is not a question from anyone, but I would like to say this, that when I think back, and Gerry was speaking earlier about the chiropractors that gave support to Life West, particularly in early days, but I think back of the families, like, and their kids now, like Dr. Ron, your kids, and the Dieter kids, and the Lloyd Latch kids, and so many that were connected one way or the other to Dr. Sid through DE, that their kids have come and graduated, not one, not two, but three or more. And so all that has been a part of the great picture of Life Chiropractic College West. And like I say, it'll continue for years and years to come. We're so proud.
Yeah, absolutely. Shane, any other questions that you have for my two guests?
Oh yeah, we have a whole bunch. So the next one comes from Dr. David Shiner. How many students were there, Dr. Clum, when you came in, and how many did you build it to at the high point?
140 when I got here in January of '81, and the high point, I believe, was just shy of 900.
Okay, next one comes from Karen Cole. What was the role of Dr. Pogrelis?
Pogrelis?
Pogrelis.
Yep. Yeah, Dan was a member of the first class at Life Chiropractic College in Marietta. And he had practiced in Woodstock, Georgia, just outside of Atlanta. And he married his wife, Debbie. They divorced, and Dan moved to California. And we drafted Dan, brought him into the college, and he initially served as a clinic director for us. And then he went through a number of different positions and was involved in development, was involved in chiropractic sciences, and was a very, very, very effective teacher, a kind, dedicated soul. And so Dan was part of the early faculty. And for those of you that visit campus from time to time, in the hallway in the main campus, there's the large painting of the hands, the chiropractic hands. Those are Dan's hand. Excuse me. Those are Dan Pogrelis's hands. And that picture was taken that they were generated by a famous photographer in San Francisco who was a patient of Dan's. So we have memorialized Dan in that imagery, but he was a very, very important and very important link to the root of the college because of his knowledge and familiarity with life in Atlanta, with Dr. Williams, with the direction of the vision of the life movement. And Dan was a very important anchor in this process in those early days. Yeah.
Yeah, and we lost him way too soon.
We did. Dan was one of the early victims of the AIDS crisis. And I remember him telling me that he was infected, and we sat in my office and talked a little bit about his situation. And I said, well, you tell me how you want to play it. Where does it go from here, Dan? And he said, I'm going to keep on staying on the faculty and teaching and so on. And I said, great. And he said, but I want the latitude to be able to talk to the student body and to let people know about the reality of AIDS and to put a face and a person behind the statistic and the number. And our students at that time had a firsthand insight into the trauma, the devastation, and the reality that was the gay community at that time, and what Dan had gone through. And Dan was selfless in terms of using it as a teaching moment and a teaching opportunity, and really was quite remarkable as he moved through that illness and onto his death.
Yeah, wow. I love it. Great man. Shane, any other questions?
Yeah, this one's for the whole panel. This one's from Dr. Joseph Ivey. What's it going to take to get Life West to the next 20 years?
20 years.
Let's see, that's 240 months.
Yeah, I remember talking to my son one time. I was talking to him about it. I just met a person that I'd known for 25 years, hadn't seen forever, and he said, "What's it take to have friends for 25 years?" And I said, well, 25 years. Yeah. I think that all the groundwork's been done, the base has been laid, and so on. And now, it's time, as Ron has been doing these last few years, to continue the refinement and the growth and the maturation of the institution. And the most important thing we can do, I think, and forgive me for putting my 2 cents in here in this regard, but the most important thing we can do is remember who we are, what we do, and why we do it, and what the ethic was that brought us into existence as a discipline, and what the ethic was that brought us into existence as an institution. And I know that for the three of us, the significance of lasting purpose, and the role that plays in the institutions, but more importantly in our lives in general, is uh, beyond description. And I think our future is best secured by the closest and strongest allegiance we can have to that root and to that perspective. And God bless you, Sid.
Yes. Yes.
Very well said, Jerry.
Dee Dee, you want to add to that?
Well, I can just amen what Dr. Jerry just said. Rock solid is what comes to my mind. Been a rock solid institution from day one. Has been that through the years, and with leadership like you're giving to Life West now, Dr. Ron, it'll continue on. So for the next 20 years, as far as I'm concerned, it's got a bright future. I won't be here for the entire time, probably, but for sure. Well, I might not at my age, but rest assured, it'll take strong, disciplined leadership who, as Jerry said, stays strong on the basis on which it was begun in 1981.
Yeah, yeah, and I will add one thing to Dr. Iby's question, and it would be centered around Dr. Iby himself. Dr. Iby is a very phenomenal chiropractor. He's dedicated to chiropractic and dedicated to Life West. And Dr. Joe, it's more people like you. I mean, that what we need is those people that live the principle, that want to see chiropractic go to the mountaintop, and to see chiropractic stay true to its principles, and do whatever they need to do to make that happen, just like you, Dr. Iby. So thank you for that question. And it's like Dr. Clum said, and Dr. Humber, we can never forget where we came from. Never forget where we came from. Shane, any more?
This one comes from our student athletics coordinator, Nolan Halverson. Awesome talk. Thanks for all you guys have done for our profession. What's your guys' favorite Sid story?
Oh, gotta edit this one out here.
I don't know if we have enough time to go into that one, right? I'll let the two of you, I have my favorite, but I'm gonna let the two of you go.
Well, this is a chance to get into trouble here. Let me think here. It was there's just
There's so many.
I apologize here. The one that comes to mind, and you're going to forgive me because this is probably getting into a little territory where we shouldn't. But Life West received its accreditation, and we were at a Hyatt in Orlando where it took place, and I got a gift from Sid, and it was a baseball cap. And on the top of the cap, it had the three letters on the cap. It said AFV. And he gave me the hat, and I looked at the hat, and I didn't know what that meant. And next thing I know, he said, "Put the hat on." He puts the hat on. He walks across the lobby of the hotel, and Carl Cleveland Jr. is over there. And Carl was a big man, and so Sid's leaning, he's whispering to Carl, and Carl's nodding his head. And so Sid's explaining he just got the accreditation. He points over there. He says, "You see that? Yeah. You know what that means?" No. I'll let you fill in the blank. But AFB was another blanking vote. And Carl started to laugh. And if you ever saw a person laugh with every cell of their being, it was Carl Cleveland. And he was bald, and he'd laugh, and his face would start to flush until the top of his head was crimson red, and Carl just couldn't stop laughing. And so that became my nickname for several years between Dr. Cleveland and Dr. Williams. But I was proud to have the vote, and I was proud to wear the hat.
Absolutely. And you know what what people have to understand is that those days, sitting at CC around the table, right? You know, with the leaders of chiropractic, we needed the vote, right? And that's really what it came down to. I want to share a really quick story. Dr. Sid and Dr. Nell were visiting Dr. Mary and myself at our house. They were in San Diego. And I'm not sure exactly, there might have been a meeting going on in San Diego, and we were coming up to Life West. So I was flying with them, the three of us, Dr. Williams, Dr. Nell, and Dr. Sid, and myself, and we're flying Southwest coming up. That's when Southwest had just started, I believe. And so as we're coming up, Dr. Sid kept saying, how can I be the first one on? Because we had number. How can I be? And I said, well, you could say that you have an injury or, you know, a disability, whatever it might be, and then you can go on first, right? So he said, okay. So he said, well, go up and tell him I have that. So I went up and I said, hey, my uncle is with me, and he's got a very, very bad hip problem. If you'll allow him on the plane, you know, in the first group, I'd appreciate it. They said, no problem, send him up. So he goes up there now. Instead of just walking up like just a slight limp, he does one of these kind of things the whole way up, like he, like someone told him just to have the worst limp in the world. And he walks up there, and they put him on first. And so he goes on, and Dr. Nell and I are waiting. And here's the thing. We walked on the plane. We might have been number 40 or 50. Every single person who got on that plane, Dr. Sid had the very front row aisle seat, and every person that came on, he gave them a card and said, Dr. Sid Williams, Marietta, Georgia, president of Life Chiropractic College, pleasure to meet you, and shook their hand, every person. And by the time we ended that flight, everyone on that flight knew who Dr. Williams was. And when I saw that, and I was sitting there for like, you know, whatever it was, the rest of the people, you know, another 200 people coming on, it was just incredible. Like he had nothing to stop him. You know, he had just nothing. He would just do whatever it took to let people know who he was, what he was, and the same thing with chiropractic. And I'll never forget that story. It was incredible to watch him like that. Dr. Didi?
Well, there's so many I could tell about Dr. Sid, but you know, you're speaking about him, and I've often said that he and Dr. Nell were the best chiropractic educational or student recruiters there ever was, because every cab he got into, it made no difference what city he was, whoever he was speaking to, he passed them one of his cards and want to know if they've been to college. Are you planning on going to college? Here's my card. I'm president of the Chiropractic College down in Marietta, Georgia, and you need to come down there. If you want to come down, we'll put you up for the weekend. And he and Dr. Nell both were always out there recruiting. But I will tell you this in relationship to Life West, Gerry, you'll particularly appreciate this. On that flight out to San Francisco to meet the Andersons in Winton, Dr. Sid wanted to stop in Vegas. So we stopped in Vegas and spent the Saturday night, and we got up, it was a Sunday that we were going to meet the Winton and Anderson. And so we got out to the airport, and they said, you're on the Champagne flight from Vegas to San Francisco. And so got on the plane, and said, Didi, you going to have some champagne? I said, I don't know, Doc. I'm not much on champagne. He said, well, they got a drink. They'll mix some orange juice with it, and you could have some of that. I said, well, I'll try that. So I got a mimosa, and I started tasting. I said, that tastes pretty good, Doc Sid. He said, yeah. And I drank one. He said, yeah, have another one. And so we got off the plane in San Francisco, and we were walking down to go to meet the Anderson and Wetlands. And he said, hey, DD, how your legs, boy? and I was holding on to the rail.
How do they walk?
And that's Jerry. That's the closest to inebriated I can remember in my life. He talked me into having 2 of those mimosas, and that put me out of it. But at any rate, I'll never forget that as long as I live. And I had to tell that because that was in association with our trip at the beginning, going back to the beginning of Life Chiropractic College West. So I don't mind sharing that.
And I think we all know this. He would always say, how's it out in Frisco? He would never say San Francisco. It would always be Frisco. I love Frisco, right? He just loved that. He loved it. Shane, I think we got time for one more question.
Sure. This one comes from Dr. Mark Ziegler. Hi, docs. Wonderful early activity. Thanks for sharing. Who was on your first board of regents and how many faculty did you have?
Boy, the faculty, well, Jim Hawkins. Jim was on the faculty. Trying to think of any of the folks that are around today, if there's any others. I don't believe there are.
So, Jerry, when you got here, how many faculty did you have?
Probably about 10. Full-time, part-time combination. It was pretty thin. And the first board of regents for Life West, we had a couple people from the Pacific States Board, Dr. Tom Turley from Millbrae and Dr. Tiscarino from Antioch, Lou Tiscarino. And they came out to the Life West board. And then the fellow that gave me my first adjustment, Dr. Kassan, he was part of the first board. Dr. Ribley, Chuck Ribley was on the board. I'm embarrassed here that I can't give you the full listing of who was there at that time, but and then I believe Reverend Standard was on the board at that point.
Carl Standard.
Carl Standard in the early.
Was Carl Dieter on the board?
Not right away. Shortly thereafter he was, but not right in the beginning, the first board. The first board that was involved in the transition from Pacific States to Life West evolved into a broader based board in the year or two after that. But right in the beginning, it was a relatively small group, and yeah, there you go.
I will tell you this. When I was in my office in San Diego, I had a list of 5 people who could get a hold of me, who could actually interrupt me, right? Well, one, of course, was my wife, Dr. Mary, my parents. Jerry, you were one of them on that list, and Dr. Williams. And those are the 5 people on that list that if they ever called, they knew to stop, come and get me, and I would step away from patients to go and see that. And I'll never forget the call I got sometime in the 80s or 90s. I can't remember where it was, early 90s maybe. And Dee Dee, you were on the board at the time. I got a call from Dr. Williams saying, Dr. Ron, I go, hi, Dr. Williams. He goes, I need you up in San Francisco. Would you go up and work with, be on the board up there? That's how it was back then, right? And I said, whatever you need. And the next thing I go, what do I need to do? He goes, just go. Jerry will take care of it all. He'll teach you everything. Just go up there and be there. And then, boom, And Dee Dee, you were on the board at that time.
Yeah. We were on there, I'm not sure, but I think maybe for 8 or 10 years.
Yeah.
Like the early days, but not in the beginning.
Nope, not in the beginning. No, and then you I know you transferred back out, and then we stayed on. But boy, those were some days. And hey, gentlemen, we could go on all night, and it's just been such a cool time to be able to relive the past and talk about where Life West came from, and and Jerry, your major involvement, and Dee Dee, your involvement, and of course Dr. Williams' involvement, and where we were and where we're going, and as we move on. And I just want to thank both of you, not just to Life West, and it's a big part of Life West, of course, but I just want to thank you for chiropractic, for the commitment and the vision and what we talked about earlier, keeping the principle alive and never forgetting our roots. So I want to thank both of you because, without both of you and Dr. Williams, of course, Dr. Nellen, Dr. Sid, for all that was done, in chiropractic and in those early days to be able to take it to where it is now. And as Dr. Joe Ivey, so eloquently asked about, what it's going to take for the next 20 years, it's that holding true to that same purpose, right? That same vision and that lasting purpose, right? Giving, doing, loving, and serving out of our own abundance, expecting nothing in return. And that secret sauce that we can call it, and the dynamic essential that's within each of us. So thank you so much for being with us. It's truly been a wonderful evening. I know we can go on for about 3 hours or 4 hours, and I'm sure someone might jump off by that time. But I just want to thank you for being with us tonight. And I just want to ask you if you have any last words that you'd like to share.
Well, thank you. Go ahead, Didi.
No, I was going to ask you to please.
Okay. Well, I just want to thank you, Ron, for the effort to pull this together, for the acknowledgement of the 40 years and for your leadership and your stepping in and your involvement. I know it's been probably somewhere between a shock to a steep learning curve, one way or the other, or both. But you've handled it beautifully, and you've brought the institution through WASC accreditation and into a new phase and a new opportunity. Kudos to you and to the folks that you're working with now and the faculty and the staff. Thank you for your loyalty and your dedication to the principles and the concepts that we hold dear and dear.
Yeah, you're welcome, Gerry. Thank you. Didi?
Yeah, well, Dr. Ron, as I mentioned earlier, it's just our privilege to be on. We appreciate the opportunity. Thinking about the future of that institution out there, the history for the last 40 years, but thinking about the future ahead. And as far as I'm concerned, you got a very bright future out there. Life Chiropractic College West is not just California or even in the U.S., but it's across the world right now in many different facets. And it's thrilling to know what's going on out there and bright future ahead. And it's just been great to be with you and Dr. Gerry tonight and to share some of our remembrances back in the early days. And I hope that those who tuned in enjoyed as much as we have. But thanks again, Dr. Ron.
You're totally welcome. And it is just our first 40 years. That's what we're talking about. Just the first 40 years. We got more ahead of us. For everybody who's with us, please know that tomorrow night I have Dr. Michael Schmidt and Adrian Miller as my guests, and they were the early deans and were under Gerry at that time. They're going to have some great stories. On Wednesday night, we have Dan Murphy and Sue Ray will be with us. So they'll be with us talking about the early days of faculty and what took place around that. So join us for those nights. And then Thursday night, our last night, we've got the first class of Life West. So come and listen to their stories, because believe me, they will be telling stories about what took place at the college in those days. So thank you, everybody, for being with us. Happy birthday to Life West. We'll be celebrating all year, but this week is really our week that we get to celebrate big time. And so happy birthday, Life West. And we'll be seeing a lot of you tomorrow night. And thank you for being with us tonight.
The wave has been so inspiring to me. I'm just so jazzed to come here every year. Always going home just energized and so excited about chiropractic, and I just want to get my hands on people already.
They did good last year, but they surpassed themselves this year. You have got to come.
I love the wave. It's been a great seminar, meeting up with old friends and catching up and learning a lot and being re-inspired.